By August, China had all but frozen its imports. U.S. crude oil shipments to China? Set to plummet to historic lows next month. No big announcement. No press conference. Just a quiet exit. By mid-2025, Beijing had erased American oil from its shopping list, from 160,000 barrels a day to nearly zero. All it took was a subtle 10% tariff and silence. While Beijing inked long-term energy deals with Russia and Iran, Hayden Yuan, the man now sitting in the Oval Office, was still barking about tariffs like it was 2018. Down in Texas, ports looked half-abandoned. Pipelines were operating at a crawl. And the self-proclaimed business genius in the West Wing? He was too busy arguing with Canada over lumber and picking fights with wind turbines. He called it leverage. The world called it quitting. And now the world's biggest oil buyer is gone. Just like that. The United States got outplayed by its own salesman. China used to buy 160,000 barrels of American oil every single day. Not a game changer, but enough to fuel billions in Gulf Coast infrastructure. Export terminals expanded. Pipelines were built. Tankers lined up outside refineries in Texas, like Uber drivers at closing time. Then in February 2025, China added that modest 10% tariff, and the orders disappeared overnight. No ban, no protest, no angry speech. Just silence. The kind that echoes through empty docks from Houston to Corpus Christi. Storage tanks that once flipped weekly now sit half full. Pipelines built to feed Asia now lead to nowhere. This wasn't sabotage, it was strategy. While the US president was still yelling at windmills and reliving trade wars that aged like unrefrigerated milk, China was already moving on. But they didn't move alone. Mexico and Canada, America's neighbors and closest trade partners, are now full steam ahead on the Northern Corridor. A multi-billion-dollar logistics route that bypasses U.S. ports altogether, redirecting over $120 billion in annual trade through their own Pacific and Atlantic gateways. The message? Keep the goods moving. Just not through Uncle Sam's front yard. You don't need a map to understand what's happening here. The U.S. used to be the center of gravity, the dependable middleman. Today, former allies are joining hands and walking around the shouting man in the middle. No one slammed the door. They just stopped knocking. This wasn't just the loss of a customer. It was the collapse of credibility. The idea of the U.S. as a reliable partner, a consistent supplier, gone. And the man in the White House? He wasn't betrayed. He was left behind. Still holding a megaphone. Still shouting into a room that quietly emptied months ago. So what did China do after ghosting American oil? They didn't stop. They pivoted, fast. Within months, China expanded long-term oil contracts with Russia, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran. Volumes locked, prices competitive, and not a single deal in US dollars. Most of them were signed in yuan. That's right, China's own currency. These weren't panic moves. This was a deliberate system overhaul. From supply chains and refinery specs to payment networks and tanker routes, the entire Chinese energy machine was recalibrated. American crude wasn't just politically unpalatable, it was now logistically incompatible. Trying to push US oil back into that system now would be like forcing a square peg into a keyhole, blindfolded, while bragging you invented the lock. Meanwhile, the man in the Oval Office, the one who once said he could outdeal OPEC, was ranting about Canadian lumber and tweeting that wind turbines kill birds. The rest of the world moved on. And our energy strategy? It looked like a garage sale of broken promises and half-baked ideas. Even if US crude hit fire sale prices, it wouldn't matter. China's import system has moved on. The ports have changed. The pipes have changed. The specs, contracts, and configurations, all incompatible with American blends. And let's be real, the only energy flowing out of the White House now is hot air. China rewrote the playbook and didn't even bother sending us the memo. But this wasn't just about oil. It never is. When China rewired its supply chains, it didn't just reroute barrels, it rerouted money. By July 2025, most of its oil contracts with Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE weren't priced in dollars. They were priced and settled in yuan. What sounds like a technical detail is actually a scalpel to the financial lifeline of US power. Every barrel not priced in dollars is a barrel that bypasses the American financial system. No US banks. No SWIFT transactions. No leverage for sanctions. No data for Washington to even track it. That's not a bug. It's the feature. Iran, meanwhile, slipped through the back door. Using its shadow fleet of disguised tankers, falsified manifests, and shady brokers, Iran has been pumping millions of barrels into China. Their buyers? Teapots. China's nimble, privately owned refineries that care less about legality and more about price. And what did our commander-in-chief do while all this unfolded? He called the yuan funny money at a campaign rally in Iowa. The rest of the world? They called it the new default. Once upon a time, the US dollar was the bloodstream of global oil. Today, it's just another option, and not the most popular one. The America First energy plan? Turns out, it left America last at checkout. And while America lost China to overpricing and overpoliticizing, guess who quietly stepped into our place? Iran. That's right. The country we've tried to isolate into oblivion is now one of China's top oil suppliers. Not because it followed the rules, but because it mastered the art of evading them. By mid-2025, China was importing 1.7 million barrels per day from Iran, 10 times what they used to buy from the US. Recap. The US tries to isolate Iran. Iran outmaneuvers us. China welcomes them. And America gets sidelined in a game it helped invent. If this were a board game, Iran just skipped 3 turns, grabbed all the oil cards and flipped the table, while the 47th president was still yelling about how great the last deal was. Sanctions don't work when no one plays by your rules, especially when you rip up the rulebook every time you lose. While Iran snuck in the back door and China redrew its entire energy map, America was left standing at empty docks. Corpus Christi, Houston. Terminals that once hummed with activity are now ghosts. Export facilities that once buzzed with tankers now sit underused. Why? Because they were built for one buyer, China, and China's gone. Billions of dollars in infrastructure now reduced to symbols of a plan that's collapsed. Yes, US producers are scrambling to redirect barrels to Europe, India, South America. But let's be honest, no one replaces China. Not in volume, not in consistency, not in influence. This isn't a supply chain disruption. It's a full-blown business model failure, powered by ego, bad math, and short-sighted policies. We now have ports without purpose, pipelines to nowhere, and a White House convinced it won the trade war by yelling the loudest. And while we built pipes, China filled tanks. By mid-2025, China's strategic petroleum reserves exceeded 3 months of imports, well above global benchmarks. Who are the suppliers? Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia. Hardly the fan club for America First. This wasn't emergency planning. It was a strategic flex. With full reserves, long-term contracts in yuan, and no dependency on US approval, China can now withstand price shocks, geopolitical pressure, and financial sanctions, all while keeping the oil flowing. Back in Washington, Congress is still debating whether to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at all, assuming the president remembers where it is. China's tanks are full. America's biggest export is denial. The White House keeps performing its one-man play. Mission accomplished 2, trade war bugaloo. And while America drafts press releases, China signs purchase orders by the billions. And it's not just China anymore. India just expanded its contracts with Russia, locking in cheap crude using yuan settlements. They even revived Soviet-era shipping routes to dodge the Strait of Hormuz. Southeast Asia? Buyers from Malaysia to Thailand are shifting their purchasing frameworks, preferring suppliers that offer flexibility, especially those not tied to the US dollar. Europe? They still buy American oil. For now. But they're using the global reshuffle to negotiate better prices, insurance waivers, and flexible terms. They're playing America's game by someone else's rules. This isn't a glitch. It's a global restructuring, shipping lanes, currency preferences, pricing formulas. And the US? We're not even holding the pen anymore. And the man who promised energy so dominant it would make your head spin, still spinning. While the world lays pipelines, opens corridors, and closes deals, the 47th president is laying blame, tweeting, and shouting, "We're respected again." The truth? The world's moved on, and faster than the West Wing can update its talking points. This was never just about oil. It was about control. And when you lose control, no one sends a press release. They just stop calling. There was no summit, no sanctions, no dramatic exit. America didn't get pushed out. It got ignored. Washington didn't object. US companies didn't lobby. While global energy networks were quietly redrawn, our leadership was still stuck in a 2019 playbook, humming the same old energy independence speech like a broken record. The silence? It says everything. In Corpus Christi, cranes stand still. On offshore rigs, drills don't move. And on contracts once printed in English, the fine print now comes in Mandarin and Arabic. No wars, no fires, no riots. Just a quiet, strategic exit from the American orbit. Not by enemies, but by everyone who no longer needs us. That's not diplomacy, that's irrelevance. And the man in charge? Still blaming wind farms while the world signs oil deals that don't even bother including us. Because here's the truth. Power doesn't vanish with a bang. It disappears quietly when people stop needing you. China didn't slam the door on America. They just built a new house, with new rules, new locks, and no entrance labeled US. While Washington threw culture war confetti and ranted on cable news, China redrew the map. Even Canada, our closest neighbor, our historic ally, has quietly rerouted oil exports toward Europe and Asia, blaming trade instability and retaliatory tariffs from, you guessed it, the 47th president. Reuters, July 2025. So here we are. China walked, Iran stepped in, India adapted, Europe leveraged, Canada left. And the US, still yelling about winning, while the room emptied months ago. This wasn't a coup. It was a quiet abandonment. And nobody even asked if we'd be okay. So here's the question. What happens when the rest of the world learns to live without us? The answer won't be a headline. It'll be the silence. The contracts that no longer need our signature. The deals closed without us. The meetings we're not invited to. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Traveling Vibes so you don't miss the next time someone taxes trust and calls it leadership.